Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Truth. I'm your host, the one you love the most, Niall Hesson, back with a brand new episode here on The Truth. Back once again with my boy, AJ Ponciano. AJ, how are you doing here today?
I'm doing amazing. We've already got 2 nights of football. Fantasy's already started. College football is just starting. NFL, truly NFL is starting now. I mean, just the best time to be alive right now for football.
It really is. We talked about it last show, but now it's officially here. Week 1 of the NFL. And today we're going to get you guys our must starts, must sits, sleepers, and busts for the upcoming week here. Obviously, if you missed our Thursday and Friday night shows, I really do recommend you go check them out just so you can hear us talk. They probably serve zero relevancy now because the games have already passed. But if you guys are looking forward to the rest of the week and trying to set your lineups for a big games or big day of games, I should say, for Sunday and Monday, you are in the right place. How we're going to be doing it this year, at least for now, is we're going to give you guys 3 must-start sits, sleepers, and busts each. It's, again, not meant to be a super long show. We want to kind of get in and out quickly and kind of give you a brief analysis of why we have guys starting, sitting, sleeping, and busting and things of that matter. So it's going to be one of those things that hopefully is relatively quick, but who knows? We like to get on a tangent about certain guys at times, but it's ideally meant to be quick and really get you guys prepared so you guys can dominate your fantasy leagues. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and do all 3 starts. So go ahead and give me all 3 starts and why.
So one's Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker is my guy this year at the running back position. Going against the Broncos, I don't think they're going to put 70 points like Miami did. The running back's going to have 4 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, and 200 rushing yards. But Kenneth Walker every day keeps on improving in the receiving game to become a 3-down back. And honestly, he's way better than Zach Charbonnet in my opinion. And if he's able to be out in the field against the Broncos, who really didn't upgrade on the defensive side in this past draft, they're very offensive heavy. I could see him having a big game here. I'm expecting at least a touchdown, 70, 50, 70 80 yards, maybe a couple receptions for 20, 25 yards there. He's my guy this year going against a really bad run defense with the Broncos. Next up, I'm going to go Kyle Pitts playing the Steelers. I get the Steelers usually have a good defense, but their linebacking core really isn't the best. They're 2 quote-unquote linebackers. I think they sometimes drop good coverage. It's TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. And even then, they're not that good in coverage. They're more of a pass rushing linebacker hybrid edge guy. But I know they went out and got Peyton Wilson of NC State, who won linebacker of the year. But again, he's not the best. He's not the best like coverage linebacker. And again, going against someone Kyle Pitts of his athleticism, kind of being more used as like a wide receiver. That's what I've seen throughout camp. Kind of moving away from that line, being able to just have a new set, and also Kirk Cousins being there, I think will tremendously help his game. Just kind of the carousel quarterbacks over there did not fit him, plus the scheme that he was running. And last up, Devontae Adams. Every time the Chargers and Raiders play, it always seems like it's a really big game. I mean, it kind of goes back a few years in the game where they kicked that field goal the last second, so they could have tied in. Both teams would have made the playoffs. Ever since then, there's always been that like chip on each shoulders, on each team's shoulders. And Devonta Smith, now I'm very excited to see him with Gardner Minshew. I was really hoping that Minshew would win that starting role over Aiden O'Connell, because if O'Connell won, Devontae Adams' value would go way down. But we've seen Minshew. He was made Pittman a 1,000-yard wide receiver, and my opinion, Pittman's really good, but Devontae Adams, I think, is even better. And there's not really much competition there. Jacoby Myers, yes. Brock Bowers, I think it'll take him a little bit for him to get into a groove early on. Marcel Meyer, or Michael Mayer. I was thinking of the Red Sox prospect, Marcel Meyer. No, Michael Mayer. More of a blocking tight end, I think, in this system. He's not much of a receiving tight end, even though they went out and spent a second-round pick, I believe, on him. I don't know. I really think with Minshew there that Adams could easily see 10 to 13 targets every single week.
Look, I understand it's late in the evening. For me, it's about 10:30 right now, so names could be mixed up a little bit. That gave me a good laugh, a laugh that I definitely
Dual
needed.
M names with me.
It was one of those things too. You said it. You're like, why am I saying this name? He's not even in the right sport. I've done that many times, and again, as the nights go on, the brain gets dumber. At least for me, at least. But my first start this week is going to be Devin Singletary. I've been a big advocate for Devin Singletary. They're playing host to the Vikings. The Vikings have terrible run defense. I'm a Vikings fan, so I'm saying it truly how it is. They have terrible run defense. I think more than that, Singletary is going to be very elusive out of the backfield as far as a pass catching standpoint, right? Singletary is a guy that a lot of people expect to kind of go into New York and either have immediate success or fail. And I think Singletary is one of those guys that can have success because he has had success in the past. I know Tyrone Tracy's injury wasn't as big of a deal as it was originally thought, and Devin Singletary could have potentially just taken that number one running back role for a ranking. But for me, I feel like Devin Singletary is going to be this year's Raheem Mostert. I really do. I think Raheem Mostert was extremely undervalued in fantasy, and he obviously showed out, and he really had a great season. So I think Singletary is going to be able to do that, especially in this matchup here against Minnesota. Danny Dimes is going to need to help the completion percentage at least a little bit because Danny Dimes has not had a good track record in the past. So be curious to see kind of what happens there with Devin Singletary, but I think his production is going to be there at least for the time being. Secondly, I'm going to go with Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert against the Raiders. As AJ mentioned with Devontae Adams, I think he said Devontae Smith for a period of time too. But Justin Herbert's going to be my guy as well. I think Justin Herbert's one of those guys that you expect to have success, especially in a Chargers Raiders game. As AJ mentioned, those are usually high scoring games. I believe it was last year. I know it was last year. It was like 63 to whatever. And I know it was on the Raiders' favor, but just goes to show that offense is going to be at a premium, especially in that matchup there. Again, Herbert's extremely undervalued. I'm not sure why. I understand they're going to run the football a lot, but he's still an NFL quarterback, and they're going to continue to throw the ball at least to a certain extent. He's got a lot of options to throw the ball to. So I think Herbert's a safe must start, especially for those deeper leagues, those 14, 16 team leagues, or for some reason you have a quarterback on IR, etc. And then finally, my final must start is going to be kind of a sleeper as well, but it's Cade Otton at home against the Commanders. I think the Buccaneers are going to be able to put up a lot of points against the Commanders. The Commanders have a really bad defense, and so I think the Buccaneers are going to be able to put up a lot of points. I think Mike Evans and Chris Godwin do get their fair share and their ample opportunities. But a guy like Cade Otton could kind of sleep through the shadows here and have success in week one right away. Obviously, as a Buccaneers tight end, you're not going to get too much recognition, but I think Cade Otton's a guy that's had success in the past. I think this could be a big year for him as well. All right, go ahead and give me your 3 sits.
So my first set's going to be Tony Pollard. I just really don't trust Pollard. I know he was played better when he was more of that split backfield, but Tajay Spears is younger. I think Tajay Spears could be more talented in the receiving game than Pollard has been. I think Pollard's a better running back in the run game, but also going up against the Bears defense in Chicago, I get it. It's not snowing quite yet, so it's not that big of a deal, but I really like that defense. The linebacking crew there, led by TJ Edwards, also the Montez Sweat there on the line. I feel like that ever since Montez Sweat was traded over, I believe week 10-ish last year, Bears defense turned into a top 5 defense in total. I mean, both Jalen Johnson's the quarterback there, who was like just snubbed from being like a Pro Bowler, even though he had like one of the most elite cornerback seasons we've seen in a while, in these past couple of years, outside of like the interceptions like Diggs had. But I just don't really trust Pollard. I mean, he hasn't proven that he can be trusted outside of that 1 year really that he split time with Zeke and played for the Cowboys, who had one of the top offensive linemen before while those guys started to retire. Next up, I have Zamir White. I know we kind of talked about the Raiders-Chargers game being a little more high-scoring. Maybe Zamir White does get into the end zone, but kind of on the same line as Pollard. Zamir White hasn't really proven anything to me. I know I'm pretty sure last time they played with that 60-point game, he did have a huge game there, but I'm not expecting that. Justin Herbert didn't play in the game. Easton Stick had like 3 interceptions, and I think the team had like 2 fumbles as a whole. Again, Zamir White isn't the biggest guy for me. I don't think the Raiders offense should be able to move the ball that efficiently on the ground. I think that through the air is where they have to go, especially with weapons. Like I said, Devontae Adams is there. Brock Bowers, one of the best tight end prospects. Him and Pitts the last couple years. And then Jacoby Myers. Again, I'm not a big Jacoby Myers fan, but he's still an option there. He's still a weapon through the air. And then lastly, Aaron Jones. I get it. He's ex-Packer, now Viking, but the Vikings are going to be playing from behind. I'm pretty sure they're going to be playing behind a lot because their quarterback is Sam Darnold. And maybe
The GOAT.
he'll show some upside in the receiving game. We saw that the last few years, mainly with Aaron Rodgers being there as being a good receiving back. But outside of that, I mean, he's not gonna have much protection. The offensive line last year, if I remember correctly, wasn't that good. They were just a carousel of running backs there this last year. Don't even remember if Dalvin Cook even played, but Ty Chandler was there. Just everyone that was on the roster. Masson, I believe, was still there for you guys at one point. I just don't really trust him or in the system quite yet. Again, I think they're going to be playing from behind. So with that, they're going to have to pass more. Maybe he gets some PPR points, but I just don't see the much rushing upside. Which he's a running back. That's where he's going to get probably 70 to 80% of his production because he's not a Christian McCaffrey. He's not Gibbs, where he's a premier receiving back. He's a decent receiving back when we need to be.
So my first must sit's going to be James Conner at Buffalo. I mean, that speaks for itself. I mean, it's going to be a tough situation for James Conner. I'm a big James Conner fan this year, and I've never been a big James Conner fan. I just think there's a lot of hype around Trey Benson, respectively so. But the Cardinals have flat out said, Jonathan Gannon has said that James Conner is their RB1, and it could evolve into Trey Benson. But as of now, Conner is the one that's the RB1. So I think, again, I have to ride that for consideration. But I think in the grand scheme of things, it's really just the Cardinals going into Buffalo. Buffalo is not an easy place to play. It's probably one of the hardest places to play. And thankfully, it's not the middle of December or it's not a Sunday night game, but it still is going to be a difficult environment for the Cardinals to play in. I really do believe that the rushing game is going to be shut down very early, which is going to definitely hinder James Conner's production and force Kyler Murray to throw the ball. Yeah, could Conner get some receptions out of the backfield? Sure. How likely is it? Probably not extremely likely. So that's one of the reasons why I definitely think James Conner is a guy that you should definitely sit. Secondly, as you mentioned, I'm going to go with Tony Pollard as well. Tony Pollard is playing against Chicago on the road. Tony Pollard is one of those guys that a lot of people expect to have success. He didn't have the success when he was a single running back in Dallas. He had more success as a running back when he was paired alongside Zeke. And Tony Pollard is not a good RB1 in my opinion. I think Tony Pollard is a respectable RB2. I think Tony Pollard is going to continue that reign. I think Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears are going to be kind of a good 1-2 punch just because it's kind of a necessity with Tony Pollard. Like, Tony Pollard is not going to be a guy that is going to go carry and be a league rusher in that matter. So Tony Pollard is a guy that I definitely think, especially in this matchup in Chicago, is going to be a rough one for him. And finally, I'm going to go with Deshaun Watson. Look, Deshaun Watson, I am a little bit optimistic about, but again, just a weird situation. In America's Game of the Week, this wouldn't surprise me if the Cowboys absolutely throttle Cleveland on the road in Tom Brady's first game as an announcer. So I think that's really what it boils down to, is the fact that Deshaun Watson is just not an elite quarterback right now. And he needs to find a way to be an elite quarterback because, yeah, they're paying him a lot of money, but this is a Browns team that can really compete for something greater. So they got to either realize that Watson's their guy or Watson's not their guy. And I think they're going to get a rude awakening against Dallas. On top of that, Dallas has a really good defense. Obviously, they have a lot of secondary members that get a lot of picks in general. It doesn't matter who's on the field, and they get a lot of sacks. I think it's just going to be a terrible situation for Deshaun Watson. I think, honestly, the Browns are going to get flat out embarrassed at home. Okay, any sleepers?
For my sleepers, my first one is Rashid Shaheed, and I get it. It's saying I always put a saying on one of these, but going up as a team like the Panthers, I mean, the Panthers may legitimately win 4 games, and that's an improvement from last year's 4 games. I just nothing on their defense helps me. Like they didn't go out and sign anyone particular that wows me, especially in the cornerback room. Still nothing there. They went out and got some offensive line and offensive weapons, but that's not going to help. Rashid Shaheed should be able to have a couple explosive plays here, and that's one of the big things with Shaheed is getting him out in space. That's what this new offense is built for. That play action game that is going to be able to get Derek Carr out of the pocket, be able to just find his guys. I think Rashid may not have a big reception game, maybe 4 to 5 receptions is a good amount, but that's what we normally see out of him. But he'll go out and have a 60-yard touchdown and finish the game with 94 yards and a touchdown and 4 receptions. I think that's a very doable line for him. Another guy, Chase Brown. Early on, I was a Zach Moss fan, that you were more of a Chase Brown fan, and I feel like I converted over to more of a Chase Brown fan. I think that they're going to be kind of splitting time there, at least early on in the season. And Chase Brown's much younger. I don't know if I go on limb and say super much more talented. At least right at this moment, he's not as proven, I would say. So if he's able to just take his chances early on, be able to run with the opportunities that he does get, that's something that I think that will really help him, especially in the receiving game. Zach Moss, our right receiving back, but if Chase Brown could really prove that he's that better receiving back, I think that's going to help out this offense much more, especially in week one when they're trying out guys. If he's been more in that receiving role than Zach Moss, PPR leagues, I think that he's a great flex option, or if you're like a 3 running back league or one of those deeper leagues where you need someone. And then lastly, Brian Thomas Jr., my guy out of the draft. This is my favorite rookie wide receiver. I get it, Neighbors and Harrison are both great, but I love Brian Thomas Jr. Out of LSU. I mean, he was arguably almost better than Malik Neighbors at times last year, and now he's going into Trevor Lawrence, where he doesn't have to be the number one guy. They have Kirk, they have Ingram still in the passing game, Travis Etienne out of the backfield. One of the big things that also helps me with this starting week one in deeper leagues was the last preseason game. I'm pretty sure Brian Thomas Jr. and Trevor Lawrence hooked up for 2 touchdowns. I believe it was only like 60 yards total, but like 4 catches, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, the connection was there, and I get it. Well, Christian Kirk wasn't out there. I think Etienne was out there, and Evan Ingram was out there as well. But I mean, it showed that even with him being in that wide receiver 1 role, Trevor Lawrence really does trust him at this point.
So my first sleeper is going to be Kirk. I got to go with Kirk. I know a lot of people are praying on Kirk's downfall. I think more than that, the reason why I'm going to get Kirk as a sleeper is because he is coming off that Achilles injury here in week 1 at home against the Steelers. But I'm really excited to see what Kirk's going to do. It pains me as a Vikings fan to see Kirk go. Obviously, we had a high optimistic future with JJ McCarthy. He's done for the year. Now we have Sam Darnold. So, it's one of those things you're like, okay, well, I guess we did kind of need Kirk. But Kirk's got a new home. He's 36, as mentioned, coming off a torn Achilles. A lot of people are writing him off, and I don't think you should, especially in fantasy. He's got weapons to throw to. Are his weapons experienced like the weapons in Minnesota? No. But can they be? Yes. They haven't had a good quarterback to throw them a football to, nor a good coach to allow them to get the ball thrown to them. So this is a win-win situation for Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons. I think especially in this matchup here against Pittsburgh, don't get me wrong, Pittsburgh's got a good defense, but Kirk I still think is going to put up maybe 300 yards and a couple of touchdowns, just kind of showcase what Kirk Cousins can do and kind of put the haters to rest. So I think it's going to be a big game for Kirk, at least a big enough game to get him a top 7 overall quarterback performance, which would definitely be a sleeper position in of itself. Secondly, I'm going to go with Brandon Cooks against the Browns. I just talked about the fact that I think the Browns are going to get embarrassed at home. I think the Cowboys offense is going to go into Cleveland and do some tremendous amount of damage. I think Brandon Cooks is going to be a big part of that. I know at the time of recording that CeeDee Lamb obviously signed a deal. I did see some reports that he may not play just because he's not as conditioned as expected, because obviously he was holding out. I really don't know, and since we're recording this early in the week, it is going to be spotty at the moment. If he does play, I'm still riding Brandon Cooks as a sleeper. If he doesn't, I'm even more riding Brandon Cooks as a sleeper. At the end of the day, with a healthy CeeDee Lamb and a healthy Cowboys offense, Brandon Cooks is the number 2 wide receiver on this team. Yes, Jake Ferguson is probably the number 2 target, but Dak Prescott has always loved throwing to his wide receivers, and he loved throwing to Brandon Cooks early in their career together. So it's one of those things that I think Brandon Cooks, especially in this matchup against Cleveland, with a secondary that I think he'll be able to manipulate very easily, will be an ideal situation for him. So I think that's going to be a big win there. Again, depending on CeeDee's full availability, it could be an even greater situation. And then finally, I'm going to go with Courtland Sutton, another wide receiver on the road at Seattle. Obviously, the Broncos have a little bit more optimism with a fake quarterback in Bo Nix. I just had to say fake quarterback because obviously you're an Oregon fan. But I think, for Denver, I think Courtland Sutton's going to be Bo Nix's one of his main targets to throw the football to. And again, Courtland Sutton has burned fantasy owners, including myself, in the past. Obviously, some rough years as a whole, but I think this is a season where you really can look back and say, hey, Courtland Sutton really helped my team. I think that's going to be a perfect opportunity for him, especially in week 1 in Seattle. Probably going to be a high-scoring game just because it always seems to be a high-scoring game in Seattle. And obviously, both these sides have a big history with, with the Russell Wilson deal, selling their entire franchise for some players. So I think this is going to be a big game for Courtland Sutton and really the Denver Broncos offense as a whole. Okay, and then any bust?
Yeah, so I have two from the same team. I have Jerome Ford and Amari Cooper from the Browns versus the Cowboys. As you mentioned, this could be a blowout game very early. Like we can know by the I don't know 2-3 minutes left in the second quarter who's going to be the winner. I mean, especially if CD does play, it could be wraps like super early. And with that, Jerome Ford. I mean, not a big Jerome Ford fan. I get it. He did play that. He was a good running back there last year in his limited time that he did play, uh, with Nick Chubb being out. But it's one of those things that I don't know how much they're going to be able to run the ball. He was a good receiving back. I will give him that. So he could get you some PPR points there. But I don't trust Deshaun Watson. I don't believe in him this year. And really, this is last year to prove that he should stay on the team. And kind of going the same thing, Mari Cooper. Mari Cooper, I get it. He's going back to Dallas. He's going back to playing Dallas, the team that he played for before. But it was one of those things that, again, I don't Deshaun Watson, don't trust him. And we haven't seen him really be good with Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper has been at his best with the backup quarterback and with Joe Flacco, and it's never been with Deshaun Watson. Maybe he had a big game here or there, but 3 years, 2 years they've been there together, and they may have had 1 to 2 big games with the wide receiver one and quarterback on the same page. And plus, that defense is amazing. I mean, Micah Parsons, Diggs should be back. So that cornerback duo, Bland and Diggs, I mean, the last 2 years led the NFL in interceptions and pick sixes. Just one of those things that nothing on that offense should stack up to be that good. Maybe in PPR leagues where they're going to have to pass a lot and you can kind of just get points from that, because I feel like Browns aren't going to sit their guys. I think they'll have them play out there the whole game, just kind of get a feel. It's not like college where in week one you kind of just start sitting your guys to see what type of potential you have later on. You need to work through stuff with your starters. So it could be one of those things in PPR leagues. They kind of can rack up 15 targets for like 7 to 9 receptions and get you points that way. But I don't see him going off and getting multi touchdowns over 100 yards. And then lastly, Austin Eckler going up against the Bucks. I mean, Austin Eckler is the third option in that running game. I mean, it's Jane Daniels and Brian Robinson Jr. are the 1-2 running options there. And honestly, Eckler, I mean, he could have a decent year. He could be a flex guy you keep on your bench, but I don't trust him. I think Robinson should show why he's the number one running back there. I really believe in him. I think that he had a solid season last year. I think that he could really take a step forward this year. But also with the Bucks defense, they got a good linebacking core. Their defensive line is pretty solid. They don't have the greatest defense, but just kind of that linebacking core kind of scares me, because really the only production I would see out of Eckler's out of that receiving game in PPR leagues over Brian Robinson Jr. Excuse me. So it's one of those things that if he's not able to go out and get you 4 to 5 receptions with like 40 yards through the air and like 30 on the ground, like he's not going to really provide you with really anything.
So my first bust this week is going to be Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford and the Rams go back to Detroit to take on the Lions. I'm just not a big Matthew Stafford fan in general. This is probably, I don't want to say probably. I think there's a good chance this could be his last year. He's got one more year after this. So probably for surely his last opportunity to play in Detroit. It didn't go well in a couple other times, but all in all, I think Matthew Stafford and the Rams are just going to be really slowed by this Lions team. I don't think this is necessarily going to be a high-scoring game for one, but I think the Lions have a lot of momentum going into this year. They are potentially Super Bowl favorites or one of the front runners to win the Super Bowl. So a lot of things are going in their direction there. The Rams have a good core. Obviously, they got Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Really curious to see how they play together. They also got Kyron Williams, and they got a good overall team, but I just don't think Matthew Stafford is going to put up the eye-popping numbers that you're going to be wanting for your fantasy team. Again, he's a guy that you could probably put in your lineup and he gets you like 12, 13 points. And again, that's just not going to cut it, especially in today's day and age with quarterbacks and how much rushing is valued. Matthew Stafford's not going to provide that. But every time I seem to be a Matthew Stafford hater, he ends up having success. So who knows? I could probably be wrong. Secondly, I'm going to go with Bryce Young. I'm going to probably go with Bryce Young until he proves me otherwise and continue to put him in my bust list. On top of that, they're going to New Orleans. And New Orleans, I like their defense as a whole. I think the Panthers bring in a couple other weapons to hopefully assist Bryce Young. I just don't think that's really going to matter, especially in this matchup here. Bryce Young obviously showed some insecurities at the quarterback position last year. He's got a lot of growth and development that he needs to do in order to have success down the line. I just think that this is going to be a longer process as opposed to a 1 week fix all. And although the training camps looked good for Bryce Young, it's really not the entire NFL game, right? Like it's a lot more fast paced and things of that nature. Bryce Young, I thought was going to be more of a rushing upside quarterback with some decent passing volume, and both were not the case last year. So again, tough situation going to New Orleans with a new team. Got to familiarize yourself with a new coach, Dave Canales, as well as some new receivers and options with the ball too. So lose-lose situation there for Bryce Young. And finally, Ty Chandler, my guy against the New York Giants. I think there's been a lot of, jumping to conclusions, assuming that Ty Chandler is going to assume this running back one role. It's Aaron Jones's role for the time being, and probably will be for most of the season. I don't need to keep talking about Ty Chandler in his passing game, but strictly Ty Chandler is going to be a rushing value guy, in my opinion. And I don't think he's going to get as much rushing attempts this season and really in this game because the Vikings are a pass-first team. KOC has always wanted to be a pass-first team. And if there is some pass-first options, it's going to be Aaron Jones over Ty Chandler. I don't think a lot of people were starting Ty Chandler, but I think more people were favoring Ty Chandler over Aaron Jones. And coming again from a Vikings fan, that's just a really bad situation to put yourself in. So I would definitely avoid him as much as possible. To be quite frank, I'd probably avoid Aaron Jones just because the Vikings with the new quarterback are going into New York. And although New York isn't necessarily like the best of teams in the NFL, they got really bad turf, and always it's a very difficult environment to play in just because Giants fans are super passionate. Thank you guys for listening to another episode here on The Truth. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure you follow The Truth on Twitter at The Truth as one to stay up to date with the latest information regarding The Truth, including podcast dates, podcast uploads, and other important information you don't want to miss. Make sure you guys also follow The Truth on Instagram and TikTok at the.tt.truth. Are you looking to find a drink that offers peak hydration, raises your energy levels, speeds up your recovery, and keeps your mind sharp with focus and memory? Look no further than Acid Rainwater. I'm excited to partner with Bloodline Sports AZ and Acid Rainwater, which focuses on peak hydration and productivity, while also maintaining an ecosystem-friendly product. Use code HESSON15, that's HESSON15 for 15% off every purchase. As always, I'm your host, the one you love the most, Niall Hesson, joined once again by AJ Ponciano. Take care and good night.